This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hi, thanks for joining us here at the Extra Point Podcast. My name's Anna. I'm the youth pastor here at Southridge Church. Joining us today is Scott. He is our lead pastor here at Southridge, and we are on the Extra Point Podcast taking a deeper dive into the Sunday sermon. We are in a series called I Pity the Fool, and in this series we are looking into the book of Proverbs for wisdom, information to live by, information that God has given people to serve them well and also to serve God and others well as well. So if you are joining us for the first time, make sure you hit that follow button, subscribe, share with a friend, and we hope that this impacts you as you hang along with us as we dive a little deeper today. So let's just start with a little bit of a recap. We spent this past weekend talking about finances and how we pity the fool who doesn't know how to handle their finances and what the Bible has to say specifically in the Proverbs about handling our finances.
Yep, so there's some dominant themes in Proverbs of what they talk about, and money and possessions and things like that is one of the most dominant topics that comes up. And it's not just concerned, like a lot of times when you talk about money in church, people get a little squirrely because they think it's all like, oh, this is all, no, the church just wants my money. It's like, no, that's not really the case. The Bible actually has a lot, especially Proverbs, has a lot to say about a ton of different topics in regards to just how to help you be successful financially. Now, giving is definitely part of being successful financially because we believe that God blesses that, but it's so much more than that. Like this past weekend, we got into even topics like how we work, right? Like, I don't know how many people really consider the amount of space that's taken up in the book of Proverbs that deals with lazy people or people that try to cut corners. Because, again, most people just look at the Bible as a book of morality. Oh, what's right? What's wrong? What can I do? Rather than answering what should you do. Like, listen, being a hard worker is part of godly character.
Right.
If you're a bad employee, that's the opposite of godly character. Right? So, like, we get this idea like, oh, God only cares about what I do on Sunday mornings from, like, 9 to 11. Like, no. God cares about the type of employee you are Monday through Friday. Like, your Christian faith isn't compartmentalized into, well, I'm a disaster to deal with at work. You know, I'm a gossip, I'm a cheat, I'm, cuss people out, whatever it might be when I'm at work, because that's work me. But then, like, church me is, no, there's no compartments in life like that. Like, whatever you do, this is what the scriptures say, we do on behalf of the Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm not saying any of us are ever perfect.
Right.
We don't have a bad day from time to time. And, oh, man, I wish I could get that back or whatnot. But, like, yeah, even the way that we work, we talked about stuff like not keeping up with the Joneses, like not like, do you know that the Bible actually, it's not like it's not a right or wrong thing. It's a wise thing. Like, poor people pretend to be rich. Rich people don't really, like, that you're rich when you don't have to pretend to be something that you're not. And that's like, if you ever go look at, like, the lives of very wealthy people, they live very modest lives. I read last week, I never got to fact check it to make sure it was completely true, but I read in an article last week that Warren Buffett still lives in the same house that he bought when he first bought a house. $32,000 he bought that house for. That dude is worth billions of dollars and still lives in a $32,000 house.
Yeah. Wow.
Because rich people don't have to fake being rich. They're just rich. And the reason why they stay rich is because they don't do the stupid crap that poor people do. That's just the truth of the matter. So, like, so the Bible doesn't just talk about giving. It has all these topics of stuff. Like, what was the third one? Like, debt. Debt is dumb for the most part. Now, I know there's business people that are like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You got to leverage debt. Yeah. Look, I get that. If you're a businessman and you're making money off of debt and all that, okay, listen, I'm not saying Like, we don't have to go to war between,
Yeah.
you and Dave Ramsey. Like, we don't have to set that up. Like, listen, I'm talking about for the average person who's living paycheck to paycheck, who is using debt as a way to live beyond their means, that is stupid.
Yeah.
Or you have exorbitant amount of car debt, which, trust me, I know what that's like. That's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that's stupid because I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
That's stupid. It's bad debt. That's robbing you of the life that you most want because you're trying to live a piece of that future life right now.
Yeah.
So, yes, the Bible does talk about giving, and we did talk about giving a little bit because it is part of your overall financial health. It's how I believe God will bless you more and more financially is if you are faithful in giving. But the Bible talks so much about other stuff in regards to our finances. Like, to just whittle it down to 6 was actually, like, there was probably way more topics that I could have covered because
right.
it's that vast of, like, the Bible is not just a book about what we can do. It is a book about what you should do given, wise decision making and being the type of person that really makes an impact on society.
Yeah, I think that the Proverbs. So I got saved. I was like 15 or 16, and I started taking my faith really serious. And thankfully, I had somebody in my life who said, "Hey, why don't you go ahead and read the Proverbs?"
Yeah.
And I started reading those as a teenager, and it started to like really form some ways to consider the world early on. And some of that is in regards to my personal calling. Even whenever I felt the Lord call onto my life into ministry, I remember saying, "Well, what do you want from me, Lord?" 17, and he just was like, "I just need you to be like Christ wherever you go. Like, that's going to be your ministry for now and maybe forever." But at that moment, that was all that I knew.
Yep.
And so that meant when I had jobs, when it was downtime, like I was dusting the shelves. Whenever it was time for clock in, if I was late, I clocked in late. I didn't clock back. I didn't change the time that I clocked in. I didn't put a
Be
fake
honest.
time.
Yeah.
I did the real thing. Like, there were just things that, and I can remember having coworkers say, "What are you doing? Like, just backlog it or just do it." And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like,
Nope.
and my time may be coming in the future, but to this day, I've never left a job in a negative way. I've never stepped away from a relationship in a way that was painful. And I'm not saying that because it's me. I'm saying because these principles work.
Yeah,
These
100%.
really work. And as we read the Proverbs and we consider these things, it's not promises. Not all those days were perfect.
Right.
And I did get reprimanded different times because I didn't do the right thing, but I was honest in not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So there were still consequences, which we've talked about in other series.
Yeah.
But the principles of, hey, God's going to still be with you in this.
Yeah.
I've been able to see that even in finances, been able to kind of give that over to the Lord. A few years ago, my husband and I started that process and it's crazy. The discipline of giving things to God begats more discipline of giving things to God.
Yes.
Like, the more that I have been able to give my finances to God, the more that I've given my mental health to God, the more that I've given my emotional health to God, the more I've given my physical, the more that I've given my friendships, my relationship. It just is a cycle that's worthwhile.
Yeah, it is. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to point out every week in this series is, like, what the Proverbs has to offer is a promise, or is not a promise, it's a principle.
Yeah.
There's a difference between those two things. And this is what the people that are like televangelists that have made like the term prosperity such a no-no word in the church is because they are offering promises that they are not God, so they can't offer those promises. There is no such thing as like a pastor that can promise you something on behalf of God.
Right.
That's just like when they go, well, I mean, for $1,000 gift, God's going to bless you in this way, or what. That's just not the way that the world is set up.
Right.
However, there are principles that if you want to put yourself in the best possible position to be blessed in certain ways, then this is how God has wired the world. It doesn't always happen like that. Look,
correct.
Sometimes people are very generous and they don't live beyond their means. They're just content with what they have. and they're still poor.
Right.
It's just that's life. It happens. But though I will tell you, those people are much more in a position in the future to receive a blessing from God.
Yeah. Well, I think even in that same mindset, it's the richness of life in those moments
Exactly.
too. Like there is a richness that comes that's not just in your finances. Whenever you're living within God's design for your finances and giving generously, even if you are still just getting all of your needs met and nothing more, there's a richness in living like that.
Yeah, that's what Proverbs 15:16 says, better to have little with fear of the Lord than to have great treasure in inner turmoil.
Yeah.
Solomon, who wrote most of the Proverbs, also writes Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes has this passage on wealth in it, where Solomon talks about how the wealthy, they get robbed of sleep at night because they are up worried about their riches. The wealthy are stressed out because of their wealth because, everybody all of a sudden, as soon as you're wealthy, people start showing up out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
You got cousins you didn't even know about with their hands out trying to get stuff from you. So, now that you're wealthy, now you got all these friends and all this. You got all these like look, the Biggie Smalls had it right? And this is exactly what the scriptures have said for 2,000 years. More money, more problems.
That's right.
Right? It is. So, it's not a promise in the sense that, yes, if you live out these 6 principles, you want to live out these 6 principles, you're going to put yourself in the best possible position to receive the blessing of God. I was actually just talking to someone before this, and they were talking about how, where I was raised in church, they said, for you to now be where you're at makes sense because you had all of that placed in you. I said, well, that's Proverbs 22:6.
Yeah.
Raise up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. I said, it's not a promise.
Right.
I know people that raise their kids in church that their kids don't want nothing to do with God. I know that it's not a promise. It's just a principle. It means there's going to be way more adults that turn to God later on in life.
Yeah.
Way more of them will have had a Christian home foundation than the ones that don't.
Yep.
Doesn't mean that kids that aren't raised in Christian homes don't find God.
Right.
That happens. It's normally the exception and not the rule. And it doesn't mean that everyone that was raised in church. It's just there's a difference between a promise and a principle. And the problem with prosperity people is they are promise givers, but they're not promise keepers because they're not the one. They don't have the power to actually keep the promise.
Right.
They're promising stuff on behalf of God. And you can't put a hook in God's mouth. You can't make him behave in certain ways because he's free and autonomous apart from all of us.
Yeah.
And so we have to make sure that we see this. When I say one of the points was you can't outgive God. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the best part of everything you produce. Then he'll fill your barns with grain. Your vats will overflow with good wine. By and large, those people that are generous to God, God is generous back to them. Then there are some people that are very generous towards God, and for some reason, God has not seen fit to bless them in those ways. I don't know. Maybe some of it has to do with your financial habits in the first place. Like if you're the type of person that God can't trust with money, he's not going to give you more of it most likely.
Yeah.
That would be ridiculous. If I'm not going to let my son or my daughter be in charge of our personal finances because, when they find $1, they spend it immediately. They don't even know, they have no business having more than what they have.
Yeah.
That would be the same thing. Why would God give someone who is massively in debt, who does not know how to manage their own personal finances, who've made a mess of their situation? He goes, oh, well, let me make things worse by giving you more. That's just not the way that God works. However, if you're more generous, God is more likely to be more generous to you. It's not a promise. This is more of a tension to be managed. He goes,
I think that's good.
I can't make God behave in any certain way.
Correct.
But I can put myself in the right position. That's it. There's no guarantee on this, but I can put myself in the right position to be successful.
I think a way to see that is whenever we see the amount of people who aren't doing things God's way, that are still finding what we would consider
Exactly.
amazing financial success.
Yeah.
We can't say, oh, well, I'm going to start doing everything their way
Yeah.
because clearly it works. That's just not the reality.
No, and the scriptures talk about how God lets the sun shine on the righteous and the unrighteous, and it rains on the righteous and the unrighteous.
Yeah.
Because, like, sometimes you'll hear people talk about, like, oh, apart from God, on and on. It's like, no. There's successful people apart from God.
Yes.
Okay, there's success. Now, do I understand why that is the case? No, I don't. But that's in God's business. That's not my business.
Yeah.
Why God allows, certain scumbags to prosper and other very righteous people to live very humble, kind of meager lives. I don't know why that is. I'm going to guess, though, that the God who is responsible for giving everything knows more than what I do.
Yeah.
And that's a level of humility that most of humanity will not reach because we want to be like the master of our own fate. Yeah. We want to be bigger in our own eyes than what we really are. And so, like, just being able to understand, like, look, I don't know why God does the way that he – so, if you want to see it as random, that's fine. Yeah. I would see it more as providence. But that also requires faith.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Bible has so much to say about finances. I hope, if nothing else, on Sunday that people were inspired to be like, this book is a lot more than just like, ethics.
Right.
Right. This is like, hey, God wants you to succeed in life.
Yeah.
But you also have to put yourself in a position to allow him to prosper you.
Yep.
Could he do it without you doing that? Yes. Does he do that sometimes? Yes. Again, I don't know why he works the way that he works. But if he gave a list of principles for this is how you set yourself up for success, follow those. Yep. And it's probably more often than not, it will go well for you.
Yep. No, I agree. I think that this series, I Pity the Fool, really kind of opens our eyes, gives us an opportunity to see wisdom that's been right under our nose the whole time. And I imagine that next week will be the same as we dive into conversations around friendship. I know some of us, I work with teenagers. Yeah. And when I think about friendship, there's such a harsh, cut-off, cancel culture that comes in friendship. And we think, where can I get information about friendship? I go to Google, I go to TikTok, I go to other friends, I go to whoever. But there's actually so much that the Proverbs have to say.
I think people will be shocked at how much there is on how you choose who you spend your time with.
Yeah.
And why it matters who is around you.
Yep.
And, I mean, there's scientific studies that show what the Bible has been talking about for thousands of years.
Correct.
And, again, we are like the generation of self-help.
Yeah.
Like, countless books been written on this and all this, and it's like a lot of this information has literally been right under our nose the whole time.
Yep.
Like, we didn't need Dave Ramsey to tell us that debt is dumb and that saving is a good idea and being generous leads to the blessing of God. It's been there all along.
Yeah.
But it's easier to read, Dave's book than the Bible, I guess. I don't know.
I listened to his podcast. That's how I found him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And listening to a podcast was easier than reading my Bible at that point in my life. But thankfully, those ties were they were able to bring me back.
Like this stuff has been here. Like when I just mentioned Biggie Smalls, like Mo Money, Mo Problems as a joke, but I did use that as a sermon illustration one time. Yeah. Because when he says more money equals more problems, that's something that Paul said 2,000 years ago. Yeah. Like the Apostle Paul in his letter to Timothy says that riches and wealth lead to more pain in life. I'm like, oh my goodness, I did not have a clue that Biggie was ripping off the Bible. But like these things have been here for so long. It's such a treasure trove. So again, even if people don't listen to don't listen yet, hopefully at least they know where to go the next time that life kind of has a question for them.
That's right. So make sure, again, that you are subscribed. Share this with a friend because this stuff matters. It matters to your life because, again, these are not promises, but they are principles. As I can speak for myself, I can't speak for other people, but as I've been following these principles in my faith journey, I've seen them to be highly valuable, and I've seen God to follow through on so many things that I thought, well, let's see. and God shows up. It's amazing. And even when he doesn't, he is helping grow faith and helping us grow closer with him. So continue to grow closer with us this Sunday as we continue I Pity the Fool, talking about friendship, and we can't wait to see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.